Just press record and there we go. And I will begin. So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Church, Managing Director of Interquest. For those who don't know, I'm sure you do, but we are a tech, digital, and data recruitment business. And welcome to episode 19 of our webinar series aimed at our community of HR, staffing and talent professionals in our network. So we're closing in now on 600 members to our meetup.org group. And the growth of this group over the last 4.5 months really does fill me with confidence that the webinars have been well received. That along with feedback I've gotten as well, which has been great. So thank you for sharing, for viewing, for liking. Please keep doing so and keep telling your friends and peers about it, and we'll keep growing this into 2021 when we kind of revamp and kind of get some new topics on the schedule. So we're on the eve, I think, of finding out what tiers we're going to be going into next week as we come out of a national lockdown. Yesterday, we also found out about the plans for our Christmases in terms of the loosening of the rules. And who would have thought back in January this year that by November we would be discussing whether or not we would be allowed to have Christmas? So a lot's changed. We've been forced to think, and in some cases, a lot of us have been forced to step out of the rat race, which many of us have found ourselves in, and really think about what we're doing with our lives. Sorry, just let someone else in there. What we should do more of, what we should do less of, and are we spending our time on the right things? But most importantly, we're thinking what is important to us now. If the values of the people have shifted, then perhaps there needs to be a shift in the values of our businesses. So today we're going to be talking about making sure your company values align with your workforce. And we welcome back the fantastic Dani Saadu. So Dani joined us on our third webinar back at the end of July. And Dani, as I said, I'm an absolute professional now compared to then, so don't worry about that. Feedback we got from that episode was really strong. So really good to have Dani back. For those of you who don't know about him, let me tell you about him. Dani is a British Nigerian who is a senior global talent people development professional with a proven track record in developing global people development strategy, designing and implementing global development programs and interventions. Dani is a certified Scrum Master and Lean Sigma specialist with a strong focus on ensuring that people development concepts and theories are translated into practical and sustainable programs that deliver a measurable return on investment. He has about 13 years people sector experience in pharma, retail and travel. And Dani is going to be talking to us today about values of the people and the workforce. So Dani, first of all, welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the last webinar that we had. So thank you for having me back.
Fantastic, good to have you. So look, when we did have you back in July, and I appreciate it's probably a different audience today, but we talked about remote working competencies.
Yeah, we did.
The new skills which you and Collinson had identified, which we need to effectively work in this world. So just to quickly, I suppose, how's that gone in the last few months in terms of the rollout and the feedback and kind of how that's progressed?
It's gone really well. We've been able to take the remote working competencies and amalgamate them into our existing development programs, so that now our development programs that we deliver on a global scale support people in being effective in a hybrid working environment. So whether or not you're working in an office face-to-face or you're working remotely, our development programs hope to support people be the best they can be in that hybrid working environment. Because according to our global well-being survey, only 6% of our workforce want to go back to working in an office on its own entirely. Over 70% want a hybrid working environment. So that is what we're going to be doing. And I think a lot of organizations are the same from what I hear on my LinkedIn network.
Yeah, absolutely. Just on that, for Collinson, what is a hybrid? Is it? Do you think it would be people wanting to do 1 day a week in the office, or 2 or 3 days, or is it really varied?
I think it'll be really varied. We've come out with a flexible working policy, and what it will come down to is down to the manager's discretion of when people are in the office. And I think it's going to be down to when there's important meetings, business critical things that are needed to be done face to face, people will come in. But most of the time people will be allowed to work from home, because it's been proven that you can work from home and you can be effective. And the more flexible you are with that working, the better, the more talent you'll be able to bring into the business, and the more people I think will stay with you long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking about it yesterday with a client, that depending how far you go with it, you've almost got a global talent pool now, haven't you?
Correct.
If you go full on with it. So interesting times. Okay, cool. So on to the topic of today. So making sure your company values align with your workforce. Dani, how do you want us to set the tone on this? Do you have kind of a starting point?
Yeah, I do. So I've got about 3 slides I wanted to take people through, but I'm not somebody who is deaf by PowerPoint. I'm very much more of a storyteller when it comes to presenting, and this this particular subject matter is very personal to me, and I'll explain why, and I'll take people through my personal journey. And also I will talk about it from a company point of view. So I'll talk about it personally, about how it's resonated with me, and also what we've done from a company standpoint, and what I believe companies should do moving forward, and how important they should take this, and why they should take it, and why it should be important to them, and the benefits they'll get from it, basically.
Thanks, Danny. Perfect. Let's go.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to start off with is can everyone see the slides? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to talk about are what are values. So, the session is about making sure your company values align with your workforce. But first and foremost, I think it's important to define what values are. And I've got a nice Google definition, as always. Values are a principle or a belief that a person or organization, which is important because it's personal, or organization, because we're going to be talking about that too, views as being of central importance. All thinking and behavior should stem from these attitudes and core beliefs. Yeah. So that's what values are. And the thing that's really important is about how do companies align their values to their workforce. Yeah. Because if you can get that match, and if you can get that match right, you can really drive high performance, a really inclusive working environment. You can create a culture that people really want to feel belong. You'll create a culture where people really feel that they belong, and they want to give the best of themselves each and every day they come into work. Yeah. So what I want to share with you is something called my values ripple. So 6 years ago, I worked with a company called Courageous Success. I still work with them now. I do a couple of webinars for them, and I'm a massive advocate of them. I was able to put together something called a values ripple. And what it is, you fill in a kind of like a questionnaire, and it comes out with what are your core values that are absolutely fundamentally important to you. And what you can see here are what are my, I think there are, what are my kind of like 11 most important values to me. And what happens is it gets prioritized in terms of waves. So the first value, which is a supportive coach, is what's on my first wave. And then you have dynamic, drive, positive impact, genuine article on my second wave. And then on my third wave, you've got gratification, clear direction, and inclusion. And then on my then you've got the values that are on my fourth wave. The first wave is what is absolutely fundamental to me that's really important, and that's around being a supportive coach. Obviously, my role is global head of people development, but something that's very important to me is being able to support people on a one-to-one basis, being a supportive coach, either usually one-to-one or in a group setting. It's something that's very important for me because I very much like to see people fulfill their potential and be the best version of themselves, and seeing somebody go from A to B on a journey is something that really resonates with me. Yeah. And the reason why I share this with you is because I put this value ripple was created 6 years ago, but in 2020 is the time I've been using it every day. Yeah. So I would say probably before that, I would really bring it out when I was going through a really challenging time in my life, or there was a real issue or something happening that wasn't too great. But what's happened to me this year is that actually I've been using it every day. And the reason why I've been using it every day is because of the current environment I find myself in. I'm a very people-orientated person. I love interacting with people and doing a job that I love, because obviously I'm within the people sector. And a global pandemic and lockdown has basically impacted our daily lives in terms of everything that we do. And we're having to obviously work in self-isolation. And I massively miss the work office banter and dynamic. Yeah. And it's been really, really tough and challenging for me. And what I've done in the workplace is I've basically created opportunities to use my values on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So because I'm now more familiar with this document and I really know the values that are important to me, I try and create opportunities within Collinson to express these values, because my belief is that if you exhibit your true values on a day-to-day basis, you become the best version of yourself. What people tend to do is they focus too much on your areas of development, the things you aren't good at, and say you must work on those things, which you must. But actually, I am a massive believer that if you focus on the things that you hold very dear to you and are your values, and you're allowed to bring them out in the workplace or in your personal life, you end up being the best version of yourself, and people say the best version of you. So I've kind of like been using this every day and kind of like bringing these values out on a day-to-day basis. The other reason why I suppose, turned towards my values and really looked inwards towards what's important to me was that at the end of March, I went through probably the most challenging period of my life. My dad, who was a doctor in the NHS, semi-retired, died of the coronavirus on the 31st of March. He was the fourth doctor to die of the coronavirus in the UK. And it was massively impactful for me because we are very close-knit as a family. And I used to see my dad more or less every day. He only lives 2 miles down the road. And from the time he got symptoms to the time he passed away was like 4 weeks. So it was really sudden and really quick. And it was very hard for us to get to come to grips with. And the thing that really resonated with me with the whole experience was the fact that he was here 1 minute and gone the next. And the things that he had in terms of his kind of like his possessions and the things that he left behind, he didn't take them with him. But what he did leave was the impact he had on other people. And the amount of people that communicated and got in touch with me who I'd never met before in my life to say that my dad had either trained them, he'd worked with them, he'd either saved their lives, was something that really resonated with me. And it made me feel that I would like to do more than I'm doing. And actually, it's the memories you leave and the impact you have in this world that actually is really important. And actually, I looked at my values and things like genuine article, things like having a positive impact are important to me, but I haven't been driving them enough in my daily life. So I've actually been pushing that so much more. And what's been lucky is that actually the things that are really important to me resonate with Collinson and the company I work in. Yeah. So these are my values, and I wanted to share with you the values of Collinson, and there are 4 of them. Yeah. And the first one is around one team. And that is around dropping the ego. We don't want people in Collinson who are all about themselves and focused on their ego. It's about doing things together, and it's about a together mindset and doing things together in a collaborative way. Yeah. The second one is around doing the right thing. Yeah. Making the right choices and respecting others and giving a damn. Sometimes doing the right thing is not always the easiest thing to do, but it's something that we champion and drive within Collinson. The third thing is around acting smarter. Yeah. Thinking about creative ways to do things, bringing new ways of working into the organization and not just doing things and breaking the status quo. And the fourth one is around being insight led. Yeah. And having a deeper analysis and before you make a decision, making sure you're making that decision based on insight and data and really thinking about it, not just kind of, finger in the air kind of thing. And what I've been able to do is to take my values ripple and amalgamate it and kind of like map it over these Collinson values. And what you can see are some of the values that resonate with me that fit into these areas. Yeah. And what I've been lucky, I suppose what's been lucky for me on a personal standpoint is that as I've gone through this kind of real emotional journey personally with what's happened with my family and the impact of the coronavirus, Collinson's values have really resonated with who I am as an individual. And what it's helped me to do is to be an even better version of myself in the workplace, to be more committed to my day job, to take on more responsibility and accountability within my role. Even though I've been having such a challenging thing happen to me in my personal life, I've actually delivered more and I'm performing better than I've ever performed. I'm having higher performance ratings than I've ever had because when I get up in the morning and I'm working for Collinson, I really feel that the company radiates and connects with the values that match mine. Yeah. And with everything that's happening right now, the people I speak to in my network and you can see this in terms of research and data, people are spending a lot more time focusing on what's important in life right now. Yeah. And focusing on what are the things that make them happy. And we spend 50% of our time at work. And if you don't feel valued or you don't feel that actually what you're contributing makes a difference or what you are doing connects with the wider organization, it could impact your mental well-being with everything else that's challenging that's going on. So it is absolutely fundamental that your values match the company's values, but it's not something that is easily done. The company need to really see it as being important, and there are things that you can do to really address that. And that's something I'm now going to focus on and talk about. Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to say, Paul, before I kind of move on to how you go about?
A couple of things. Do you mind just going back to the previous slide for a sec?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, just.
Well, you mean my values?
Yeah,
you mean?
This one. Just on this, because I think it's important that there's a process you went through to identify the values that you had or have. What does that process look like for someone who's like kind of thinking, what are my values? Hang on, what would you recommend?
Good question. I think you don't need to necessarily do it on your own. I think it's important to talk to people. Yeah. Talk to people you trust and respect. Get some coaching. Have a good mentor. Talk to your loved ones. Talk to friends. If you've got a good relationship with your manager or people you trust within the workplace, they can career coach you or have conversations with you about what they see in you that they feel is important, because sometimes you're not aware of what your values are. So sometimes if that's the case, I think you would have to interact with other people who maybe will be able to help you on that journey. Yeah. I think it's absolutely important. I'm also a massive advocate of a strength-based approach. So for those of you guys who don't know what a strength-based approach is an approach where you focus on driving someone's strengths. Because if you focus on driving someone's strengths, they feel more confident, they feel a better version of themselves, and actually you get more from them. Yeah, because actually everybody has a unique set of strengths, everybody has a unique values, and actually if you can bring those to the forefront, you get the best version of themselves. And actually that's why some people are more suited to certain roles, certain careers and certain sectors than maybe other people.
Yeah, it's almost, when you're saying that, it's almost the 80-20 rules popping into my head. Kind of put 80% of your time into 20% of things you're good at. And in terms of, you mentioned kind of you've been using these values every day. So what does that mean when you look at these values in terms of your day-to-day? How do you think, right, I'm going to utilize, how do you go about that?
It's really simple. I just ask myself the question, so I look back, I reflect on a week, or I look ahead of a week, and I say, am I going to be a supportive coach this week? And I look at my calendar, I look at my diary. Do I have any interactions or sessions where I'm, either coaching or mentoring somebody on a one-to-one? I look at what work am I doing this week that's going to have a positive impact. So I'm lucky enough that I knew that I was having a session like this week, where I was having a webinar where I'm going to be talking to people about the importance of their values versus their company values, and hopefully it will resonate and radiate with people. I look at, so for example, what is my activity this week around inclusion? Am I creating a situation or a scenario where I'm inviting people to come and join me on something? So what I do is I look at my values and I look at what my activity is, and I think, how is my activity resonating with my values? And if it's not, then I try and incorporate things that do.
Perfect. Thanks, Danny. We've got a question through actually from Hiran, so we'll just jump to that quickly, and then we'll let you crack on with it. So, Danny, I know most companies try to weed out the people who are not in the one team mindset interview stage, but there are people who will slip through in the process.
Yeah.
What do you do when they're in your company and don't care about the values of the business or the vision, but more about furthering their career? Do you try and coach them into the mindset? Big question early on. I like it.
Yeah, of course you do. I think that's where you need really strong leadership and really strong management, because as long there's a concept that really resonates with me called the shadow of a leader. And the shadow of a leader is a concept that the behaviors and what's important to a leader can resonate, and sometimes gets picked up and copied by the people that they manage and lead. And if as long as the management team and the leadership team consider the values to be important and they are trying to drive that right behavior, then it will resonate with the people within the team. And what will happen is, it's either the person will conform and realize that actually this is a really important behavior and will be challenged on it, yeah, and do something and kind of change their behavior to kind of align with the business, or long term they will probably think actually this is not the right culture for them and they will naturally leave. But it needs I suppose for me, strict kind of approach to it, and constant messaging and constant interaction around those behaviors, in my opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. Hope to answer the question here. Cool. Thanks, Danny. Please do carry on.
Okay, so I think so as you can see how my values resonate with the companies. Let me give you some examples of how Collinson has really done this really well. Yeah, organizations need to speak to their people. They need to interact with their people and find out what's important to them at any point, but more so right now, because I truly believe that people are going to remember how organizations behaved during this global pandemic, during this lockdown. People will look back at companies and think, how did my company act, or how did certain companies act when some people were at their lowest point, going through a global pandemic, through situations we've never been through before? How did they act? What did they do? What was important to them? How did they treat their people? Yeah. And I think that is going to be really important to people in terms of their long-term commitment, whether they stay with the organization, their career progression, how much they give to the business, that kind of thing. One thing Collinson do very well is that we send out a monthly well-being survey, and the well-being survey asks what's important to the organization, and we get themes and anecdotal feedback about what's important to the business. Yeah, and as a result of that, we are then able to implement and put things in place as a result of how people are feeling, what's important to them. Yeah, so I give you some of the things that we've done since we've been on lockdown. We have introduced a domestic abuse policy. Yeah. One of the things that's happening within the UK, and I think globally, is that domestic abuse has increased because of the fact people are on lockdown and at home and are forced to be at home. And therefore, the increase in domestic abuse has gone up by a really large percentage, more so than ever. Yeah. And actually, because people spend 50% of their time at work, work should be a safe place for them. Yeah, if they're experiencing domestic abuse, but there's only 10 to 15% of organizations that have a domestic abuse policy. So Collinson are leading the way with that we've introduced a domestic abuse policy. We've trained certain people within the organization to be beacons that people can go to share what's going on in their world if they are experiencing domestic abuse in a confidential way, and we will support them. Yeah. And that for me is doing the right thing. That is for me is having a positive impact. That for me is doing something not because there is any financial gain in it, it's because that actually is the right thing to do. Yeah. Another thing that really resonated with me was that a lot of you will be obviously familiar with what happened with George Floyd and the incident and the impact it had on the world. Because of the fact I think we were going for a global pandemic, we're on lockdown. Everybody was, via their TV screens, everybody was kind of like able to tune in to see what happened with George Floyd, and it had a massive impact. People were protesting around the world. That's how big it was. And what was nice was that we in Collinson we have diversity and inclusion networks. So we have a positive action network for the LGBTQ community within Collinson. We have a positive action network for our BAME community within Collinson. We have a positive action network for our women within Collinson community. And the BAME network, which is called Kaleidoscope, is I'm part of that network. I'm the treasurer. And what was nice is that we were able to have a conversation with our board about how the whole incident with George Floyd made us feel, and actually how it highlighted that there was a bigger issue in the world, not just in America, but also in the UK as well. And as a result of that conversation, the board decided to put out a public statement externally and internally about the importance of diversity and inclusion, and the fact Collinson take it seriously, and that we stand behind our colleagues who are from an ethnic minority background, and we want to create an environment that's inclusive to everybody in the organization, regardless of their background and where they are from. They didn't have to do that. They didn't. And because they did that for me really made me and a lot of people within the business made it feel that Collinson were doing it for the right reasons, and that actually they take this really seriously. Yeah. And the reason why I think Collinson is doing things like this is because they are really connecting and talking to their people. Yeah, for example, our CEOs have a monthly ask the CEO anything. So what happens? We have two joint CEOs, they're brothers, David and Christopher Evans, and they have a monthly webinar every month, and you can ask them any question. And I mean, more or less any question. And some questions have been some really humdingers, and they've answered the question, regardless of how tough it's been. And it's our opportunity to interact with the CEOs to find out what they're going through. And it's really personal, because you have a lot more empathy for them, because you understand the challenges they're going through and what's important to them. And also they're able to hear from us what's important to us. And all the questions they get asked, if there is a real theme of questions that are coming through around a particular topic or subject matter, it gets addressed and they do something about it. And that is a company I'd like, that's the kind of company I want to work for. The other thing I can talk about is that I got approached with an opportunity to work with the NHS. So my dad worked for the NHS for 40 years. He dedicated his life to the NHS, and it could be because he was working semi-retired as a GP that he contracted, no, as a doctor he contracted corona. We don't know, but I was presented with an opportunity to work as an associate non-executive director for a local London trust, NHS trust, which I'm doing, and I started this week, and I had my first board meeting this week, and Collinson was supportive of me doing it. They've allowed me to do 2 days a month supporting that, and they know the relationship that I have with my dad and how important it was to me as a. So I'm getting a bit emotional. Collinson knew how important it was to me to support me in doing it, and as a result of that, I can't thank them enough for it. And things like that I think are really important. And I put a post about it on LinkedIn and thanked them personally, and it had over 50,000 views. So if you're anybody who's kind of like looking at that post, you'll see that, you know, Collinson as a company is a good place to work, and they're supporting their employees in things that are really personal to them. And as a result of that, I've been approached, and I can say this to you because my boss I've told my boss about it. I've been approached with 2 roles, and actually for more money. And I've actually said I don't want to join the organization. I've said no, I don't want to go, because actually I feel a loyalty to Collinson to help us get through this really challenging time that we find ourselves in, because 80% of our revenue comes from travel, and we've been really impacted. And actually, we're actually making a second round of redundancies right now. So even with everything that's going on, I actually commend Collinson for doing all of this stuff, even though we're really struggling. So they're still thinking about their people. They're still making really, you know, important decisions. They're still doing the right thing by what's important out there in today's society, even though they're struggling themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to cover there. I mean, first of all, Dani, thanks for sharing, you know, the personal elements of why this is also important to you. You know, I really appreciate that. I'm sure the audience does as well. I think the couple of things are standing out to me there. I think one thing when you're talking about Collinson, I think so we did a webinar about a month ago or so on EVP in 2020, employee value proposition, and authenticity is so important when it comes to the values. And it's out, you know, unless they really truly believe in these values, and it's not just ticking a box, it's not going to work, is it?
It's not going to work. No, it's not going to work. I completely agree. It's I'll stop sharing now. It's not going to work. And the thing as well is that because of the fact that with what's going on right now, I know, and I have a feeling most of you on this call have had an opportunity to do this. You've all probably reflected on what's really important to you right now in life. Yeah, and money is important, but actually probably to a lot of people, money is important, and I understand it because it's a livelihood and it's a necessity, but actually you probably have thought about other things that are more important that really resonate with you. And if the values of the organization don't resonate with you in that aspect, you probably will be thinking, okay, when, you know, will I be there long term? Am I going to give 100%? Because of the challenging things we are going through right now, it's really hard to wake up in the morning. Like, you know, James came on the call and said it's Groundhog Day. It is. We're getting up, working from home. It's the same old, same old. So what is driving you to be the best version of yourself at work if it's not what you believe in, if it's not the fact that you have some sense of purpose, of meaning? And for that to happen across an organization, a company needs to really have good values, and it needs to resonate and radiate with the people that are in the company.
100%. I think for years now, I think the importance of money, of course, we all need it, we all want it, has declined, you know, compared to 15, 20 years ago, when, you know, a lot of the research I've seen from Computer Weekly, when people are deciding about whether to move on, it's not about money, it's not the most important thing, it's about purpose, and it's about feeling like they're really part of something. And I think 2020 has absolutely amplified that more than ever. And I think, as you said, I think unless a business has that emotional attachment of its people, they're going to lose those people, because that is much more important these days.
You know, and what will happen is as you know, when I think what you don't want is I believe that an organization should be having people right now in the organization, sticking with them right now because they choose to stick with them and they want to be with them. They want to help them get through these challenging times, not being with them because they want to play it safe and don't want and have nowhere else to go, and because there's no opportunities for them and they have to stay where they are. You want organizations, you want employees to be sticking with the organization because they think, you know something, I don't want to be anywhere else right now. And
yeah, absolutely,
even when we come out of this, I still want to be with them.
Yeah, because that fear factor will go. You know, people might hang on to their jobs right now, but the world will be better. You know, we will get to a better place, and then
people will leave. If you're staying for fear, people will then leave because the fear is no longer there and it's gone. So I think the way organizations should be driving this is to drive more visibility and accessibility. Even though we are working remotely, I feel that I've got more access, and I feel I have more access, and I see leadership have been more visible than they've ever been. Yeah, we've got a platform called Workplace, which is Facebook for business, and we've got our senior leadership team are putting posts out and videos all the time about what they're doing. So I've seen last week Christopher Evans was putting up a post around the fact that he was walking his dog, in his guard, in his fields behind his house, and we've got a Pets for Collinson kind of like work group where our CEOs put things on that are funny. People are really putting the human side into communication right now and making things more accessible. It's funny because actually I feel I've got to know more about people in our senior leadership team working in this way than I did when we were face to face in the office.
Yeah, in some ways we've never been more connected and yet so far away, have we? I mean, absolutely. I think we've seen the same sort of thing in InterQuest. We've got a couple of questions that come through. So
please, ask me.
Firstly, a comment from Hiran again. So, Dani, good to hear about Collinson doing the right thing for the right reasons. Where you can tell that a number of companies are paying lip service. That's cool to do right now. Put a message out, and again, just hammering home that authenticity that is so important, as with everything. And Oliver. So, Dani, very moving to hear your story of Collinson. Assuming you were interviewing with them before you started working with them, how much was there a focus on the alignment between you and the company? Is this values alignment having renewed importance, or has Collinson always focused on values alignment, do you feel? Great question, Oliver. Great question.
I think that it wasn't as I don't think they did it as well as they should have done when I first joined. There's been a real shift, and Paul will know who I'm talking about. There's been a real shift in the culture since my boss, Bertie Tonks, became Director of People and Culture and sits on the board. And it's really, the senior leadership team really matters. So there's been a real change in the senior leadership team since I've joined, and some new members have come on board. And I think the way the organization is going, they've made it a real focus, and it's been re-energized since we've gone through this period. Definitely. I don't think it was as great when I first, because I've been with the company 4 years now. I think it's got better as time has gone on. People have realized and have fed back that actually this is really important to us, and therefore the feedback has been taken on board. It's a journey, really.
Cool, thanks, Dani. Good question, Oliver. And yeah, Bertie's a top guy, also not a bad magician, as I've had the pleasure of seeing in person. Okay, so let's talk about, I suppose, process. In terms of the surveys, I know you put a lot of emphasis in terms of the feedback you're getting from the people in the business. So do you want to talk about how you, I suppose, what the process is for that, how often you're tracking how people feel, tools you use?
So we use a company called Impulse. That actually I'm about to fill my survey in just after I finish this call. So we send it out once a month, and we've got about there's just over 200,000. There's over 2,000 people globally within Collinson, and I would say approximately over 50% of the people fill it in on a month-by-month basis, and it gives us a really good indication about what's happening within the organization, and common themes and things come out of it. And as a result of that, we are then able to implement and put things in place and actions and initiatives in place to try and help the organization and move them forward. And because we've been so hot on it, what we have seen is we've seen an improvement in scores in the well-being survey, even though we're going through our second round of redundancies and it's a really tough environment. And Impulse have come to us as an organization and said, we are one of the only companies where we've seen an improvement in well-being scores, because obviously Impulse work with a lot of organizations around well-being and surveys, and they've got data on a lot of organizations, and we're one of the only organizations where we're seeing a positive impact in scores moving forward, even though we're going through a really challenging time, which is really good. The other thing I think the other thing that's come out of it is that we've been a real champion around mental health and well-being. It is so important and fundamental right now. Yeah, and that for me is something that really resonates with me, because I think I'm somebody who drives performance and development of people, and hoping that they can be the best version of themselves to drive the performance of the organization. And if people's mental well-being and mental health isn't right, they won't perform. Yeah, it's that simple. Their mental health and well-being isn't where it should be, and they're not feeling great, they won't perform. And there's been a real drive and support around mental health within the organization, because people say it's important to them. We have mental health first aiders. We have a really good resource on our SharePoint drive around where you can go around mental health. We deliver. We have every week we have a well-being Wednesday. We give guided meditations. We offer well-being support and services. And yeah, so what we're doing is we find out what's important from our people in terms of our value, and we're just implementing it, really.
Cool, thank you. And so I suppose, have you had any I've got a couple of questions, but just on that, have there been any real revelations in the last 6 months that have come out of your surveys, which which I suppose yourselves and the people who are putting those surveys together hadn't really thought about? Is there anything that really stands out as being something which sparked a change in the business or anything at all?
Yeah. So the kind of things people have been, so the kind of thing that came out of the well-being survey that we hadn't thought about was, but it makes sense, but we hadn't thought about was some people were considered about their financial situation or financial situations. So considering, what am I going to do long term? Investment, moving house, job security, all that kind of stuff, managing their finances, because the economy, we're going to go through a really challenging economy for the next couple of years, depending on what happens. And that came out, that resonated with us, and we didn't realize that people maybe might be thinking that. It wasn't on our radar. And as a result of that, we actually now offer free financial advice. So you can sign up to free financial services and advice via our internal employee assistance program. So something like that came out that we weren't expecting. I think the other thing that came out was that that people wanted more, not less. So let me tell you what I mean by that. One of the things that we've identified is that people's workload has increased since being in this global pandemic and on lockdown, because we've made redundancies, and we still have people on furlough. People have limited resources in their team, so they're spinning more plates and doing more work. And as a people and culture team, we thought we would probably step back. We should step back from our people and allow them to do the work that they need, because obviously they're working remotely. They've got more work than they need to do, and they're actually busier than they've ever been. But what we have found, the opposite to that actually they want more connection from their people and culture team. They want more support, even though they are busy and are doing more work than they've ever done. And they want to feel more connected to the organization.
Okay, makes sense. And the financial advice is interesting. It made me think of a conversation I had this week with a client, and they asked, what are people doing now in terms of benefits? Because suddenly the beers on the fridge on a Friday, whatever, isn't a benefit anymore, is it? Because there's a whole webinar to talk about the benefits people need to think about offering their staff as you move forward. Financial advice, 100%. What a great one.
So yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Cool. So, okay. So, if you're a business and you're concerned then about, I suppose, this topic, you're thinking about how do I align our values with the workforce so it's authentic? Well, apart from surveys, what else should that business do you think to really get in the right frame of mind for its people, making sure it's aligned?
I think the senior leadership teams of organizations need to be more accessible to their people and have more of a people-centric approach. We identify people-centric as a core competency for remote working. We identify a people-centric approach as a core competency, and it's something that we're trying to drive in our culture. And our senior leadership team, I like to think we're doing we like to think are doing it very well, and are making themselves more accessible. And when they are interacting with people, are focusing more on how people are feeling and what's going on in people's worlds before going to performance and delivery. And because our senior leadership team are having this people-centric approach and are exposing themselves and are coming across more humane, therefore people feel more confident and more open to share what their concerns are.
Yeah, makes sense. And it's impossible to be everything to everyone. So how do you make sure you connect to as many people as possible without diluting the true spirit and authenticity of that value proposition of your business?
I think you need to find the right balance between obviously listening and supporting your people and matching up the values, but also realizing that we're businesses at the end of the day, and we need to deliver, and there's a commerciality and profitability element that needs to happen if businesses want to survive. And I think if a company goes too far the way of tell us and being maybe too much on their people, it might come across a bit disingenuous. I think finding the balance between, yes, it's important that we listen to you and our values match your values match the company values, and that we're taking time to hear what our people have to say, but also we need to incorporate that into driving the business forward and delivering, because the business won't survive without profit and good commerciality.
Of course, makes sense. So I've got just two more questions really to wrap things up. If anyone in the audience has got any more questions, we've had some really good ones, and do pop it in the chat box or put your hand up. But Danny, I like to kind of finish part of my evolution as a professional webinar person now, is I like to wrap things up in terms of I suppose a one thing type scenario. So one thing for the business and one thing for the individual. So if we start with the individual, what's the one thing you'd recommend to a worker in terms of identifying whether that business they're in the right place?
I think the one thing I would say is they need to identify what are the things that are important to them. What are the values that really resonate with them, that make them who they are and make them the best version of themselves. Because once they identify those things, they can then determine whether or not the company match them. And if the company don't match them, I would strongly recommend that they find an organization that does. Why be? Life is too short. Your life is too precious and too important to not be doing a job that resonates with you, that gives you a meaning, that gives you purpose, and makes you the best, and makes you want to really make a difference. Would be the thing I would say to the individual.
Absolutely great advice. And then I think it's kind of recapping some of what you've already said already, but just to kind of hammer it home, if you are a business, look, most businesses have got values. They had values in part of their business for years, but how do, as a business, what's the starting point of making sure your values are the right values for the people in your workforce and for 2020 and beyond?
I think first and foremost, you need, as an organization, you need to identify what are the most important values of the people who are in your organization, and get some form of theme and commonality with the people you work with, and then think about what do you want, what do you want the company values to be, and try and match them up as much as possible. And once you've done that, then you want to communicate them and publicize them and put them out there as much as possible to create the right environment for those values to thrive. And the thing, and I think organizations need to realize that this is not just a nice to do, it should be a necessity, because if you do this right, as organizations do this right, what you will have is you'll have the best people staying with you, not people who are staying with you for the wrong reasons, and you will attract the best people. And also what will happen is that as we move forward, in the future and the economy gets better, this is going to be it is very important to people. I have conversations with people on a daily basis. I do a lot of work with young talent coming through. I'm a coach I'm a coach and mentor to younger people coming through in terms of CSR and charities and stuff. And the thing they always say to me is they want to join an organization that's making a difference. They want to join a company that resonates with their values, that is doing something more than just making pound notes. And if companies don't stand for that in the future, then I don't think they'll attract the best people. And therefore, they will struggle with, keeping the best people, and that will affect their bottom line.
Exactly. This isn't like this isn't a nice idea. This is your business has to do this. One, because it's the right thing to do, and B, because you'll lose people, and commercially you need to do it 100%.
And I think a global pandemic and lockdown has put more of a spotlight on it, in my view.
Absolutely. And then final recap, because Oliver's just asked you to recap something you said earlier on. So how did you say you developed your core values, Danny? So how did you take any tests? Was this based on self-reflection and speaking with people?
Yeah, no, I've got to be honest. I'll send the link to Paul. There's a company called Courageous Success. I work with some really good suppliers, and this company called Courageous Success, a lady called Liz, their company helps people to understand what their values are, to figure out what they are, and then tell them how to use them moving forward. So if you don't do that, I would then recommend making sure you speak to somebody, or get a coach, or get somebody who knows you very well to help you identify what your values are.
Perfect. Thanks, Danny. And I think that's it. I think, look, we've covered so much. Thank you so much for sharing everything, Danny. I think there's a lot of takeaways. Our audience has held strong today as well. So I think everyone's been as invested in it as I am. So thanks for joining, everybody. Next week will be our 20th week of webinars, and we're going to be talking about culture. We're going to be talking about maintaining and building culture from startup to scale up. But Danny, look, thanks again so much. And what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to kind of ask you any questions?
LinkedIn. I'm heavily on LinkedIn. I accept everyone, and I try my best to support people where I can. So people message me on LinkedIn and ask me to either do career advice or to support them or to give guidance. And yeah, I'm willing to do that, because giving back is very important to me. because it was to my dad. So yeah.
Legend. Thanks, Dani. Well, I'm going to go away now and think of another reason why we can get you back on the webinar, because you're absolutely one of our favourite guests. So thanks for being on again.
Come back anytime.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you all next week.
Thanks everyone.
Cheers, guys.